Welcome back to the world of Port Charles, where alliances fracture, secrets boil to the surface, and even the strongest families risk collapse under the weight of betrayal. **** The corridors of justice and vengeance intertwine in a way only Port Charles knows, and at the center of the latest maelstrom stands Molly, torn between her father's twisted ambitions and the moral compass that once defined her. Rick, once a trusted figure in Molly's life, has plunged headfirst into murky waters that even he may no longer know how to navigate. And while his manipulations play out in courtrooms and clandestine meetings, far across the Atlantic, another storm is brewing, one that has Carly Corinthos pacing the floors of her home, plagued by maternal instinct and a dread she can't explain as Jocelyn embarks on a seemingly innocent trip to Europe. Everything began unraveling when Molly stumbled upon a conversation not meant for her ears, a brief but damning phone call between Rick and an anonymous ally. At first, she chalked it up to typical legal maneuverings, but when she pressed further, she uncovered something that would fracture the last strands of trust she had in her father. Rick was blackmailing Alexis. Not some adversary or rival in the courtroom, her own mother. The implications were staggering, and Molly felt like the very foundations of her family had been set on fire. With mounting rage and disappointment, she confronted Rick, not behind closed doors but in a public setting, where every word hit like a bullet ricocheting off marble walls. The confrontation was raw. Molly didn't hold back, accusing Rick of sacrificing integrity for ambition and calling him out for betraying Alexis during one of her most vulnerable legal cases. Rick tried to justify his actions, claiming Alexis had crossed a line and that his hand had been forced. But Molly didn't buy it. For her, the damage was done. Rick hadn't just betrayed Alexis, he had betrayed the entire concept of family, and in doing so, destroyed the trust of a daughter who once idolized him. As the conversation dissolved into shouting, Rick walked away, not victorious, not defeated, but diminished. Yet Rick's troubles didn't end with his daughter's fury. Behind closed doors, he was facing a completely different kind of fire from another formidable force, Ava Jerome. Ava, always calculating and perpetually a step ahead, had been collaborating with Rick on a high-stakes financial scheme involving laundered money tied to a defunct real estate shell company on the outskirts of Port Charles. The plan had been simple: funnel the funds, divide the spoils, and disappear from scrutiny. But like all deals with the devil, it unraveled with the greed that sparked it. Rick believed he deserved a larger cut, citing the legal risks he had absorbed in manipulating contracts and shielding the operation. Ava, unsurprisingly, disagreed. She reminded him that without her connections, charm, and leverage over several key players in the deal, there would have been no pipeline at all. Their argument wasn't just tense. It was laced with venom, with each threatening to expose the other if pushed too far. Rick hinted at a hidden USB drive with incriminating evidence, while Ava reminded him that she had more than one favor owed by people in high and very dangerous places. The money was never just money, it was a symbol of power, of control, and whoever walked away with the lion's share would hold influence over future chaos. But while Rick and Ava carved out their own personal battlefield, trouble was already taking shape an ocean away. Jocelyn had recently convinced her mother to allow her to visit Europe, an academic exchange program in Paris, peppered with side visits to other major cities. Carly, wanting to trust her daughter's maturity, reluctantly agreed. But in the days following Jocelyn's departure, something gnawed at Carly with increasing force. It was more than the usual maternal nerves. It was instinct. Deep, primal, and unrelenting. Carly tried to dismiss it at first, attributing her unease to everything else going on in her life: Sonny's latest turf war, Michael's growing emotional distance, and the vague rumors that someone powerful was watching the Corinthos family again. But no matter how much she tried to suppress it, the anxiety kept growing. She began obsessively tracking Jocelyn's itinerary, calling the exchange program, even going as far as reaching out to Jason and Brick for background checks on the European hosts. What she found wasn't reassuring. One of the chaperones had a sealed juvenile record, and another had an untraceable financial connection to an offshore account tied to a company Ava had once been affiliated with. Carly's instincts kicked into overdrive. She knew the threads might be coincidental. But Port Charles had taught her there's no such thing as coincidence, especially when Ava Jerome's name is anywhere near the ledger. Suddenly, this wasn't just a protective mother worried about her daughter's overseas trip. This was a potential abduction or manipulation in the making. She didn't know what the endgame was, but she was certain someone had made Jocelyn a target, and it might be tied to a chain of events beginning right back home, with Ava and Rick. Carly wasn't about to wait for disaster to unfold. She took the next flight to Paris, determined to track Jocelyn's movements herself. Unbeknownst to her, she was being watched the moment she landed. A woman in a tailored trench coat snapped a photo of her exiting the terminal and made a call in hushed French, confirming the mother has arrived. Across the ocean, Ava received a message without a signature. Just 3 words, "She's in Paris." Ava froze for a moment, her expression unreadable. Then she whispered, "Too soon." Meanwhile, Molly, still reeling from her confrontation with Rick, began to investigate the extent of his illegal activities. She contacted a trusted friend at the DA's office and quietly requested sealed documents from Rick's most recent cases. To her horror, she began uncovering a pattern: subtle manipulations of evidence, suspiciously timed settlements, and clients who disappeared after paying large retainer fees. The same shell companies connected to Ava's laundering scheme popped up in case after case. Suddenly, Molly realized Rick wasn't just morally compromised. He was criminally vulnerable, and Ava was either the mastermind or the perfect scapegoat. Molly wrestled with what to do. Turning Rick in would shatter the last vestiges of her family, but remaining silent would make her complicit. As she debated her next move, Carly sent her a cryptic voicemail from Paris, warning her that Ava's reach may have gone international, and that the web Rick was caught in might be much larger than either of them had imagined. The urgency in Carly's voice chilled Molly. Something terrible was unfolding, and the only way to stop it was to expose every secret, no matter the cost. As Ava met with a new associate in a candlelit restaurant in Marseille, Rick stood in a darkened courtroom, handing off a briefcase to a courier with trembling hands. Across the Atlantic, Jocelyn strolled unknowingly through the Louvre, a stranger lingering too long at her side. And back in Port Charles, Molly opened a sealed envelope containing a list of names, one of which made her gasp aloud: someone from the Corinthos inner circle was involved. The question now was no longer who was guilty. But how many layers of guilt would Port Charles be forced to peel back before the truth finally saw the light? For Carly, Molly, and everyone touched by the shadows of Rick and Ava's dealings, the coming days promised revelations, betrayals, and choices that would change their lives forever. Because in this city, danger doesn't wait for permission, it arrives uninvited, wrapped in secrets and sealed with blood.